Welcome to episode 57 of Sport SA Daily Diary. Today we change to the man behind Madiba's security team, Rory Steyn. Rory, how are you doing today?
Adam, how's it, man? I'm very well, thank you. Well as can be expected under these crazy circumstances. But yeah, did a little Pilates class at 7, and I took the dog for a walk just after that. So and it's great weather. It's not a breath of wind, blue sky. Can't complain.
So
how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Good. Also went for a little 8K run this morning, trying to keep active,
Nice.
which I think is important in these times.
Certainly.
Rory, you're not the first member of the Steyn family that we're chatting to. We chatted to your boy Carl.
Yeah.
You must be an incredibly proud dad at the moment.
Yeah, both my wife and I, we're proud of all our boys, Adam. But the reality is that we've never had an international sportsman, or well, it can only be a sportsman with our boys in our family. And just to see somebody like Kyle making his international debut after quite a long and convoluted and rather surprising journey to get there, and to stand at Murrayfield. With 65,000 Scots, although there were a lot of French supporters in there as well. And hearing them sing Flower of Scotland is truly something that raises the hairs on the back of your neck. It's just beautiful. And the great thing as well was that it was National Women's Day in the UK that Sunday that Scotland played France. And the piper right on top of the stand at Murrayfield was a lady.
Oh, brilliant.
So I thought that was, really a really cool touch from the Scots. So very proud.
And tell us, Rory, what were the emotions when Carl went onto the field? Obviously we've chatted to Carl and you've heard his interview about the nervousness of him going onto the field when he got told he was going on. What were you feeling when you saw him on the touchline about to go on and get his first cap?
It's the weirdest thing, Adam. So I flew over there literally in, I don't know, it was probably something like 30-something hours. The plane landed at 11:30 on that. It was a Sunday game on the Sunday morning, and kickoff was at 5 p.m. So I literally went from the airport, chucked my bag in his flat, and got the train to Edinburgh from Glasgow. And I thought that it was going to be this huge kind of upswell, and I can get pretty emotional. Don't worry about that. But I was very calm. It wasn't until I watched the replay when I got back, because obviously I set my decoder to record it on SuperSport. And it wasn't until I got back and saw the whole thing start to finish, saw him standing in the tunnel, coming out of the tunnel, going onto the field to sing Flower of Scotland. That's when the emotions hit. But, standing there watching, it's like, coach, it's 60 minutes now, so there's only 20 minutes left when you're going to put this kid on. And then, of course, they scored that try just after the 60-minute mark, and then it was the obvious time. So, so on he came, and there was more pride than emotion there. But as I say, it hit me later when I got back home.
Yeah, I'm sure. How many times have you re-watched the game?
Probably 3 or 4, hey?
And tell us, Rory, after the game, Carl had to go into the suite and give a bit of a sing-song.
Yeah.
How was that?
That was special. So he tells me via WhatsApp that he's got a seat for me in the president's suite, which I thought was pretty cool. And when I got there and spoke to his fiancée, Ali, because she was with me on the train as we went over, I said, how does this work? She says, well, normally each player gets one extra ticket for their other half. So Ali would ordinarily have got one, but they gave Kyle 2. Not that the coach necessarily 100% knew that he would definitely put him on, but just in case. And the president's suite it's a huge room, but you sit outside. You sit on the actual stands, and then you go in there for a reception. And because you have to wait for Her Royal Highness Princess Margaret, who's the patron of Scottish rugby, nobody can have a drink until she's arrived. So you have a lot of standing around afterwards. And then, HRH walks in and everybody can relax, and then they can order drinks. And then you sit down for a full meal. The dinner is served, and both the captains in this case, the French and the Scottish captain, make a short speech of thanks, and they exchange ties or whatever it is. And then the president of the Scottish Rugby Union, who also happened to be a lady, she calls Kyle up. Fraser Brown got a special cap because it was his 50th Test match, and Kyle got his first cap. And then you can see him standing on the stage, and he goes back down. And then Stuart Hogg called him after he'd done that captain speech that I've just spoken about. He calls him up and says, "Okay, there's a little bit of a tradition here. We have a first cap. Kyle, get up here and sing your song, and you have to stand in front of 300 VIP guests and sing a cappella." And he actually did a very, very good job. And so all his mates that had advised him said, "Look, sing something that's well known and that gets to the chorus quickly." And then everybody just sings along and everybody relaxes and you can go and sit down. So he did. So he sang that George Ezra song, "I've been riding shotgun." And he did well. And as soon as that chorus came, everybody started to sing. They were quite right. And but I thought it was a pretty gutsy thing to have to do in front of all those people, and they're all VIPs, And he got a standing ovation from that entire room, French and Scottish players and VIPs alike, when he was capped. So yeah, that was pretty special. It was certainly worth that 30-something hour trip over to Glasgow to go and watch.
Absolutely, you wouldn't have missed it for the world.
No.
Rory, you were a sportsman yourself growing up. You played rugby. You've run 10 comrades, am I correct?
12.
12 comrades.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about your growing up and your love for sport.
I don't know what it's been, Adam, and I always tell people only a little bit tongue-in-cheek that rugby is the game we're going to play in heaven one day. It truly is the ultimate sport because every size and body shape, height and weight has got a position in rugby, from the big bloke at tight head to the skinny little chirpy number 9 at scrum half, tall beanpole locks, speedy guys, strong loose forwards, skillful, gifted players at 10 and 12 and 15. So it's just a great game. And it's also got this awesome ethos that you really do bash the heck out of one another for 80 minutes and then go and have a beer. And what happens on the field pretty much stays on the field. So rugby has always been my first love. I went to primary school in Potchefstroom. There's only one English primary school in Potch. There were 7 Afrikaans ones. And so therefore playing soccer was never going to happen. I'm talking about the 70s. So I learned to play rugby since I was probably 6 or 7 years old, as did all of our boys. But I also played a bit of cricket. I was a very average cricketer, and funny enough, I was a sprinter at school. I always used to come second. It used to really irritate me, and I was one of those late developers. I didn't really grow until I hit matric, probably actually after school did I really grow into my body. I remember going back to an old boys rugby game at my high school, Roosevelt High, here in Joburg. And the first team coach looked at me and he said, "Yeah, you see, now I can do something with you." Previously, I played third team in matric, although we were undefeated. We had a great third team because we had a really powerhouse bunch of under 16 players coming out of the previous year, coming into the open division. We had 2 strong matric teams making up the first and second. So there were only 4 of us in matric in that third team, and I got all of these really talented little under 16s to work with, and we didn't lose. And I mean, if you looked at the points for and points against over the season, it was something like 500 odd for that we scored to about 40 points against us the whole season, which was pretty cool. But then I picked up a rugby injury. So I left school and joined the police. And I played rugby for Joburg Bobbies at first league level for 6 years. And in my very, very first year, I got a late tackle as I was passing the ball. So I'd swung my weight over onto one leg. So while standing only on one leg, I got a late tackle, and it took out my ACL in my right knee. It blew it out completely, just ruptured it completely. So I had to go through that awful 6 months of rehab, not really knowing what I was going into. And fortunately, I had probably the best knee surgeon on planet Earth do the op, Ponky Ferrer. Ponky is a legend. He played Springbok hockey. He was the goalkeeper for the Springbok hockey team way back in the 60s, and he operated out of Rosebank Clinic at the time. I think he still practices way into his 70s, but he's now at Linksfield Clinic out Bedford View, Edenvale way. But anyway, Ponky did this amazing job of fixing that knee. So I ran those 12 comrades after having a complete ACL reconstruction. And this is how it happened. So I get this physio purely by chance. Her name is Tony Hesp, and she's a great friend of mine today, somebody that I admire greatly because she's got close to 30 comrades. But at that stage, she was probably around about 11 or 12 herself. And so while she's treating this knee, we're talking about comrades. And I just said, the obvious thing you say to somebody, why on earth would anybody, run that distance? As somebody said to me, my phone doesn't even phone that far, man. Or that's why I've got a car. If I want to go to 90 Ks, I'll get in my car and drive there. And we started to chat, and she being a green number, she was, she was pretty passionate about the race, and she's a very kind of level-headed lady, Tony. And I said to her, you know what, Tony, I'll make a deal with you. If you fix this knee so that I can play rugby again, then when I'm finished playing rugby, I'll run comrades with you. And I did that, and it just happened to be the 2000 comrades, which was the millennial one. It was the first time they had the 12-hour cutoff, and they'd basically done that to get a whole bunch of runners that had finished running comrades back into road running, because the average age of road runners in South Africa was going up and up, and there weren't that many youngsters, joining clubs and all that. And of course, that was a massive success, because now, 20,000 entries sell out probably on the first day that comrades open online entries. So I'll never forget that. So we were running she ran for Rockies out in on the East Rand, also Edenvale Way at the time. And there was a guy who was a black blind runner called Johnny Demas. And Johnny's pilot, the guy that used to run with him through many of those comrades, a guy called Rory somebody or other, I don't know, because I wasn't a member of that club, but that guy died as they were training for that 2000 comrade. So they had to find somebody new to run with Johnny through this comrade. So this guy called Benji Porter puts up his hand and says, okay, I'll do it. But he's a novice like me. He's never run comrades before. So how do you guide somebody and who's blind, who's a green number, and you haven't even run one comrades? But Benji had a very, very strong head. So the point is that Tony thought that she better stay with Benji just to keep an eye on him and make sure that they both get through. So we were quite a big bunch of guys. And there was a guy called Rolo. I think you might know Rolo.
Yeah, Mark.
And he was also running as a novice that year. So there were a bunch of us. And I remember as we came into that stadium, it was, funnily enough, it was the same finish that they're now using at the casino. As we were approaching that tunnel at the casino there, Tony said, Rolo, Rory, come here. Benji, listen to me. She said, you're only ever going to have one first comrades finish. So I want you, when you go into the stadium, I want you to look around you, and you must absorb this atmosphere. People are going to be banging on the advertising hoardings. They're going to be shouting. Enjoy it and remember it, because you've only got one finish. And you know what, Adam? For every single one of the following 11 comrades finishes, I always thought of those words from Tony, and that's what I did. And that's what I tell everybody else that runs their first comrades. I say, just take a moment to absorb that, because it's very, very special, And she said to us, and you guys are men, but you're allowed to cry. If you run across that line and the emotions build up, it's okay to cry.
100%. I'm also not the most emotional person when it comes to sport, but that finish of that first comrades was something quite unique. Rory, rugby's played a huge part in South Africa's history. Yeah. Obviously, you've had a big part in that as well, having been the PPU for Nelson Mandela for those years when he came out of prison. Tell us a bit about his love of sport and why he put so much focus on that 95 Rugby World Cup.
Well, I always say whenever I'm asked questions like this, Adam, I always say that I would never presume to speak for the president. But he's on record. I mean, when he was asked by Johan Rupert to be the patron of the Laureus Sport for Good Foundation, and he went to his first ever Laureus Sports Awards I don't think it was in Monaco that year, but it doesn't matter where it was. He was asked to make a speech. And, that's on record. You can Google that speech where he says that sport has the power to change people in the way that nothing else has. Sport can go where nothing else can go. And sport speaks to young people, to the youth. And if you think of the whole Olympic charter and the Olympic ideal, it's about the youth of the country. You know, the president always says when he closes the Olympic Games, he says, I call upon the youth of the world to gather in Tokyo in 4 years' time. You know, that's what would have been said in Rio. So he says sport has the ability to speak to the youth in a language that they understand. And you know what, and I'm not a politician, but politics, policies, speeches, none of those things can touch people like sport can. And I just think Madiba knew that if we are going to get the Afrikaner, especially the Afrikaners, but white South Africans, if we're going to get white South Africans on side and get them to buy into his ideal of building one South Africa, then the way to do that is through rugby and through the Springbok. And of course, he had made his study of especially the Afrikaner psyche by talking to his prison warders, on Robben Island and in Victor Verster, and he befriended a number of them. So he really got how important rugby was and how important the Springbok was to whites, but in particular to Afrikaners. And he just utilized that in such a positive and powerful way. I mean, that mere act of pulling on that number 6 shirt and walking onto Ellis Park, to greet the teams before kickoff. I mean, I don't know whether you've ever watched those. I don't know whether you were there, Adam. I don't know whether you were old enough. But if you look at the tapes and they're probably available still on SuperSport on DSTV catch up, because they played a lot of that stuff. And if you look at that final and watch that tape or the recording, when he walks onto the field, that crowd of 60,000 rugby fans in there, 98% white, predominantly Afrikaners, start to chant his name. And in those days, we as whiteys didn't know the word or the term Madiba. So we didn't know yet that was how you refer to him, and that it is a term of respect, not a term of familiarity, because it's a single name. So they start chanting, Nelson, Nelson, Nelson. And I remember walking out of the tunnel. Well, the first thing that happened when I walked out of the tunnel, Andrew Mertens wanted to go, and the All Blacks fly off, wanted to go and test the pitch conditions. So he said to me, would I walk down with him? So I did. And as we walked out of the tunnel into the sunshine, that Boeing flew over the first time from north to south. Yeah. And there was just this thunderous noise. And we looked up, and there were the words painted underneath it, good luck, Booker, And it's all part of the history of that fantastic day. But then a few minutes later, the teams line up and Madiba walks out, and I hear this chanting, and I'm looking around me thinking, can this be happening? Yeah. Can white people be shouting and chanting a name of a person that many of us considered to be a terrorist all those years ago? And now, through one act, pulling on a rugby jersey, he's kind of like onside and he's accepted, and, we'll give him a chance, and look what he's done. And we all just saw him in a different light. So he was absolutely correct that sport has that. So that's what I would say. I mean, I don't necessarily think that he enjoyed going and sitting and, watching an African Cup of Nations final or watching a Rugby World Cup final live, but he understood the importance of that, and being there was important to him, because he knew how much it could mean for nation building.
And Rory, I think it's incredibly important that we keep his legacy alive. And for me, I've obviously got my 2 young boys, and we try and tell them the stories. But something like Invictus, the movie, helps that sort of relay that story in an easier format. There are parts of that movie that I'd like to get some insight into. One being when he went to the Sports Commission, where they wanted to change the name of the Springboks, or the Commission wanted to change the name of the Springboks to the Proteas. And then the second, the elements where you as the PPU were playing rugby outside. Were those real life events? Did those happen? And what were those moments like?
Yeah, I can tell you that I think that Clint Eastwood and his production team did a really superb job of communicating the importance of that single day, because the whole movie of Invictus is about the 24th of June, 1995. The whole movie is about the final. And, if you show that movie in England, in Australia, in New Zealand, in South Africa, in Canada, people get it. But the United States audience, which would be the largest movie-going audience for a US-produced film, wouldn't necessarily understand that. So just the way he told it. I mean, I thought that the rugby scenes were very average. They were pretty poor. I should have just gone to Stellenbosch University and gone and got a whole bunch of Marty's players out of the Corsair there. They would have done a much better job.
And a better referee.
Yeah, exactly. Be that as it may, I think that he did an extraordinary job of telling the story of that day. And what was your question again, Adam? Because I've gone off at a tangent again.
Sorry, did the PPU play rugby between themselves and the going to the Sport Commission?
For sure. So going to the Sport Commission, I can't comment on because I wasn't there. But the story, has been told and retold that absolutely he managed to convince the old, I think it was called. It wasn't called SASCOC then. It was called another acronym, but in any case, was it SACOS? Yeah, I think it might have been SACOS, the South African Council of Sport, who gets to determine, the national symbols on the left breast of any representative team. And he did manage to convince them that due to the importance of that symbol, the Springbok symbol, to particularly Afrikaners, we need to allow the Boks to play the Rugby World Cup with that on, and thank goodness that he did manage. But I wasn't there. But I can tell you that when I was a member of the PPU, our office was just down the road from the Union buildings, and we had a big sports field there. It was big enough to have a cricket strip on it. And we used to, as part of our PT when we were training, we would play soccer and touch rugby on there. So we would. And they were always mixed teams, and we would try and teach our black colleagues, a little bit about rugby, how to pass the ball, how to catch the ball, what you can and can't do. And likewise with soccer, we were completely out of our depth, So all of that is true. And I can tell you that I was on a training course the one day. It was a pretty exclusive training course. Only PPU members went, and soldiers from the recce units of the SANDF were on that. And the motorcade drove past, and he stopped, and he got out, and he came onto the field, and we all stopped doing what we were doing and sat down and listened to him with our sweaty clothes on. So that was a part of who he was. So I wasn't personally there when he stopped and interrupted a game of touch rugby, but I can well believe it because I've seen him do it during other training that I was involved in.
Yeah. And Rory, tell us, you were obviously the lead PPU at the time of the Rugby World Cup, and you chose to go and look after the All Blacks. That's a strange decision.
Very strange. So I was playing rugby. So that knee injury that I was telling you about happened in 88. And I played first league rugby right up till 94. And I told my coach during the 94 season, I said, Coach, this is going to be my last year, because next year the Rugby World Cup is coming. I knew the Cops would have a significant involvement and role to play. And I said, I want to make sure that I work at Rugby World Cup. And because I was so when they gathered all of the VIP protection guys together at almost like it was a weekend seminar on how they were going to run the protection of the 16 teams. And each team was allocated 2 VIP protection cops. So my rank was the most senior out of all of those 32 oaks there. So I got first choice. And being the absolute idiot that I am, I forgot that the Boks as the host nation also would have qualified to have protection. So I chose the All Blacks. And I often say, Adam, that I don't have many regrets in my life, but maybe one of them is that I didn't choose the Boks because I could have been part of that very special time of celebration. And I knew so many of the players. I mean, playing first league rugby in Joburg, I was playing against Francois Pienaar and Kobus Wiese and Japie Mulder and James Small, because they were, those guys, rugby was amateur then, so they were playing for their clubs. The first bunch that I mentioned were all at Rau, which is now UJ. And James Small was at Wits, and when Wits played police or Rau played police, I played against those guys. And so it would have been rather lucky. But you know what? Things happen for a reason in life. I'm a firm believer in that. And, the fact that I'd worked with the All Blacks in 92 when they came and played the first test match after the end of the sporting boycott or sporting isolation meant that I knew them and I knew the coach. So it was a pretty easy pretty easy job going forward. But hey, life takes those kinds of turns, and there I was. I'm not, I don't regret it to to the extent that I thought it was a massive error, because it was still a wonderful privilege to have been involved in the Rugby World Cup. What was difficult was sitting next to Laurie Mains, the All Blacks coach, after Joel kicked that drop through, and we still had a few minutes to play, and I'm gritting my teeth and kind of like willing this out to blow the whistle, and I can't jump up and celebrate, because I'm sitting next to the coach of the losing team. It was a difficult day. Yeah,
I'm sure. I can remember being a Man United fan. I went to a game at Goodison Park, Man United against Everton, and was given tickets in the Everton stand, and United won 3-0. And here I had to sit through every goal, not say a word, not a peep. It was incredibly difficult. So I can only imagine what it was like during the World Cup final.
Well, I'll take that as revenge for them beating us 1-0 in that FA Cup final, Adam.
So, yeah, special time for Madiba. What was he like away from the spotlight? Did he? I mean, obviously he didn't have a massive amount of time, but did he enjoy watching sport on TV, or so what was his things to do to come down and relax?
His thing was to read the newspapers, and when I say papers, I mean that. He read every single daily newspaper, cover to cover, every day. That was the way he relaxed. And he would watch sport. But it would more be like a passing interest, not like a fan, because the sports fan means you're a fanatic. He wasn't like that. He would watch it, and he would be aware of results and what's going on. And he was brilliant, Adam, at phoning our sports people whenever they achieved success on the sports field. So if Ernie else won a major, or even if it wasn't a major, just a regular tournament, he would phone him. Amanda Kutzer was in the top 10 of women's tennis at the time, and she had a lot of success. He would call her wherever they were in the world. He would ask his secretary to get the number and to phone them up and wish them well. And I think of the 96 African Cup of Nations. I was actually just talking the other day to Lucas Radebe, and we were reminiscing about those days, because the team was when they were in Joburg, they were always in the Sunnyside Park Hotel, which was a short drive, like 10 minutes from Madiba's home in Houghton, not even 10 minutes. And we were there, and sometimes he would just say, let's go and see the boys, get in the car and go there. So that was the way he operated. He was interested in our sports people because of the fact that it wasn't just about rugby. Sport is sport, and sport speaks to the youth in a language they understand. That was his belief.
And Rory, I mean, you look at the sportsmen that have met him over the years, and a lot of them have said that's been one of their pinnacle moments in their career, the likes of David Beckham or Tiger Woods or whoever. You must have met some incredible sportsmen during that time as well, obviously being by his side. Anyone in particular was a standout for you?
That's a tough one, Adam, because for a few reasons. One is that whenever I was around those people, if they were guests of the president, then I was on duty, so I had a job to do. My job wasn't to run around like a groupie and we didn't have phone cameras in it, so you couldn't have got selfies. But you get the point. So my job was a very specific one, and that's another thing that I'd like to just say, because I always make a point of saying it, Adam. Yes, I was the team leader, but I was only one of 4 team leaders. There were 2 teams down in Cape Town for when Parliament was in session, and there were 2 teams up here in Gauteng, and I was one of the 2 Gauteng team leaders. So again, it wasn't all about me. I served with a bunch of extraordinary men and women, and we are very close today. We're like a family. And even 20 odd years after the privilege that we had to serve him. So that's what I want to say. I get how privileged I was. It wasn't all about me. And when I was around all these people, and even going overseas, I mean, I've slept in Buckingham Palace, for heaven's sake. My job isn't to walk around with my head on a swivel, appreciating all the art on the walls in the palace, because we've got a job to do. It doesn't matter where we are, whether we're in Buckingham Palace or in South Africa or in Kunu in the Eastern Cape. Our job is the same. We need to keep the president safe, so when he goes to bed tonight, he's alive. So, but I mean, you're right. It was just a tremendous privilege to even see these people in the flesh.
So no one in particular that you always thought, jeepers, I really want to meet that guy, and you got that opportunity?
Well, I think I think that if there was one, it probably would have been Princess Diana, but I wasn't there because she visited the president when he was in his residence in Cape Town, and only two of us used to fly down from Waterkloof whenever he went down to Cape Town for Parliament, and then we of course slotted in with our colleagues from the Cape Town teams, and that was just purely a roster, and my name was not on the roster when he went down and hosted Princess Diana at Genadendal. That's the name of the president's residence in Cape Town. So I missed that one. So maybe that would have been the only one because I greatly admired her. And, you know, the others were obviously interesting and of a passing interest, but it was nothing more than that because I was on duty.
And Rory, not specifically a sport question. You must have some unbelievable stories and unbelievable memories of your time with Madiba. Is there one that sort of stands out that sort of gives you that lump in your throat, that goosebump moment that you think, wow, that he made such an impact on my life? Obviously, there's the being at his funeral and those sorts of moments. But is there one during your time with him that was like a real goosebump moment?
Yeah, there are many, Adam. There really are many. And we became very used to hearing him make the same speeches and tell the same jokes and watch him do the same things. But those things that we did were almost always in a spirit of, of nation building and of making a difference. So we, for example, if Parliament was in session, he would fly down to Cape Town early on a Monday morning and go straight from Esterplaat Air Force Base straight to the Parliament building, and then spend the whole week there in Parliament. And we would fly back when the session closed on a Friday afternoon, or sometimes even a Friday evening, fly back. And he always slept at home. He did not sleep in the official residence in Pretoria because he had his 4 grandsons at home with him. And, you know, nobody would ever deny him that, you know, having been in prison for such a long time. And one Friday, for whatever reason, he left Cape Town at about lunchtime and flew up. And then, of course, we get the message, hey, the president's moving. He'll be at Waterkloof in 2 hours. So we get together, we get our vehicles out there, and we're waiting. And I'm thinking, this is cool because it's Friday. It's, you know, we're not finishing at 6 or 8 or 9 in the evening. We're going to finish at 2 in the afternoon, and we're done. We can go home. Long weekend. And as we land, he calls me, Rory, man, I want to go to Secunda. I said, Tata, why do you want to go to Secunda? He says, no, there is a young lady there. So there was a young girl of about 10 or 11 who was suffering from a terminal cancer. And you know, the Reach for a Dream Foundation had this thing where you could make a child could make almost a dying wish. And this little girl had said she would like to meet the president. So he tells me we're going to go there. So now nobody knows, nobody's prepared. It's completely off the cuff. It's as he's landed. So I said, Dada, just give me a bit of time. I need to make some arrangements. So I start calling, and I get hold of cops there, and I send them there to the hospital, so that at least, you know, there's somebody there when we arrive. And Adam, I don't know what it is with nurses, but whenever Madiba walked into a hospital, all those nurses would completely lose their heads, and there would be ululating and dancing and singing and celebration, and, you know, nobody kind of got treatment. But he went into this ward, and all of that happened, and he sat with this girl, again, a little Afrikaans girl. He must have spent 45 minutes with her, just talking to her, you know, hearing her life story, understanding what, you know, her dreams and aspirations were, even understanding what was wrong with her. And then he spent the rest of the next couple of hours that we were there going to all the other children's wards and talking to all the other kids. So that was just, you know, one of the special things that I saw him do over and over. And we knew that if there was any environment that the president was in and there were children, 100% he's going to go to the kids. He's going to call them together, and he's going to probably sing to them or sing with them. And he would always sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. We used to laugh at it, but it was really very special and, you know, and quite precious. But the story that I think I'll tell you actually happened on that state visit to the UK that I was telling you about when I slept in Buckingham Palace, because we went there in July of 1996. So it's the English summer. It's beautiful. We're in the palace, and he is asked to plant a tree one of those memorial trees in St. James's Park. Now, if you know anything about the geography of London, where you've got Buckingham Palace sitting on that traffic circle there where the Victoria Monument is, you've got the Mall where the London Marathon finishes, by the way, and I've run 4 of those, including a PB. My PB of 3:26 was run at London Marathon in 2006. So the Mall goes up from the Palace to Trafalgar Square, and all of the park on the right-hand side of that is St. James's Park. It's beautiful. It's got a winding kind of pond through the middle of it, all kinds of geese, swans, and waterfowl and all of that in there. It's a beautiful place to go for a run, beautiful place to go for a walk. And because he had to do the tree planting at I think 7:30, we decided that we will just walk from the palace to the site of the tree planting, and we would drive back, which is what we did. By the way, it took me years, Adam, to go and find that tree, because whenever I went back to London, I would always run in St. James's Park. I would always try and find the park warden and say, hey, where's the tree that Nelson Mandela planted in July of 1996? And I got sent on a few, wild goose chases, but ultimately I found somebody and I found the tree. And it was, when he was asked to plant it this morning that we walked there, it was a little sapling. It was probably no more than a meter or maybe 1.2 meters high. And you know how they do this ceremonial thing? They put it in the hole, and there's a pile of soil there, and there's a spade with a bow around it, and it's all shiny, all of that stuff, And so we walk over there, and he is asked to lift. Apparently, the protocol is you lift a pile of soil onto the spade, and you do that 3 times so that the press can all take a photograph of the ceremonial plant of the Mandela tree in St. James's Park. And then, a gardener will come and finish it. Well, that didn't apply to Madiba. So he picks up that spade and he starts digging, but he's digging that whole pile of soil into the hole. And he's going for it. And eventually a palace official came over and said, Mr. President, it's okay, sir. We'll get a gardener to come and finish the job. Oh, okay. So he was quite keen to, to do it properly. But when I eventually found that tree, Adam, the thing must be 15 meters, if not 20 meters tall now. It is enormous. And it's there, and there's a little plaque on the ground, no bigger than the lid of a shoebox, that just says the Mandela tree, and planted by His Excellency President Nelson Mandela on whatever date it was in July of 1996. So I always go and pay homage to that tree whenever I go there. Yeah. Oh, and there's another moment that really was quite an emotional one. So on the last day of the state visit, he had to go to Brixton to open a community center, which we did. And things went a bit wonky there, and I had to evacuate him and all of that. But when we left Brixton, we came to South Africa House at Trafalgar Square. And it really struck me as we walked, because we dropped off on the far side of Trafalgar Square, and the bobbies had put up these crowd barriers around and in between the fountains and the columns and the monuments there. And there was a massive crowd in that square that day. It looked like, what Trafalgar Square looks like on New Year's Eve, as they bring in the new year and shoot the fireworks. It was that packed. And we dropped off on the far side, as I say, and he walked between those crowd barriers and people cheering and all that, crossed the road, they'd blocked the traffic, and into the doors of South Africa House. And it struck me that... The definition of the word road is... Sorry, I've got Siri now trying to tell me what a road is. So, for many years, right through the apartheid years, there was always an anti-apartheid movement demonstration outside South Africa House. I'm told whether it was one person or 200 people, somebody was always there demonstrating. Yeah. And as we crossed that road and walked in there, it struck me that here was the man that personified the end of that protest and the end of that era. And he was walking into South Africa House, and I'm with him. And we get in a lift and we go up onto a balcony that overlooks the square, and there are 2 columns holding up a kind of peaked roof like that on this balcony, and I'm standing behind one of the pillars so that the press that are covering this event can't see me, because nobody's there to see me. They're there to see Nelson Mandela. And I remember him standing there with his arms up like this, and he said there's a microphone on a stand, and he says to the crowd something like, I wish I had big enough pockets to take all of you back home to South Africa with me. Thank you for coming. I love you all. And I literally remember pinching myself, standing behind this pillar, pinching myself. So now when I go for a run in London, and I run through St. James's Park. I go and look for the tree. I pause there and just remember. And then I run into Trafalgar Square. I fight the taxis and the buses and the bicycles and the scooters, and I go into the middle of Trafalgar Square where I can see that balcony up there at South Africa House. And I just remember this extraordinary day and this privilege that I had. I mean, that's just, it could have happened to anybody, and it fell into my lap, and I'm just grateful.
Yeah. I mean, it's memories you'll remember forever and pass on to your grandchildren and so on.
Sure.
Rory, you now have your security company. You're working with cricket in India, in South Africa. Tell us a bit about managing cricket tournaments from a security perspective.
Oh, gee, Adam, how long have you got? So I remember when I was about to leave the police, because I decided quite early on that when Madiba finished his 5-year term of office, which would have been June of 99, he handed over the reins of the country to President Mbeki on the 16th of June. And I knew that I didn't want to continue in the cops. I felt that I'd already driven the Rolls Royce. I didn't want to now go and protect anybody else. I'll do something different. There was nothing more in the police service that kind of attracted me. So I thought I need to leave and do something on my own. So that's what I did. But before I did that, I went and spoke to a number of people, some of whom I considered mentors. And I just said, and one of them was Ali Bacher. Dr. Bacher was then the managing director of the United Cricket Board of South Africa, which has now become Cricket South Africa. And I said to him, Doc, I said, look, all I know is policing and security, but my passion is sport and sports marketing, which is something that you do now. Sports marketing as an industry was literally, Adam, it was in its embryonic stages. And I said, Doc, that's my passion. Is there perhaps something that I can do in sports marketing if I leave the police and start out on my own? And to a man, and I think there were 5 people that I consulted, every single one of them told me to stick with what I know. They said, go into something to do with security, because I'd been a cop for nearly 18 years. So that's the conversation that I had with Ali Bacher. Then, Adam, do you remember the 3 tenors coming out to South Africa? They had a concert at Union Buildings. So it was Luciano Pavarotti, it was Placido Domingo, and Jose Carreras were the 3 tenors. And it was a beautiful evening. It was a big, special VIP black tie event, and Vodacom were the sponsors. And my team was not working that night that Madiba went. Obviously, Madiba goes now as a guest, and I'm not working. So I get invited by Dot Field from Vodacom, and I'm in the VIP marquee with a champagne glass in my hand. When Ali Bacher sees me on the other side of the tent, he comes over and he says, so Rory, this is a pretty special night. He said, have you decided what you're going to do when the president finishes? I said, yeah, Doc, well, actually, I have. I'm going to leave and I'm going to start up my own security company. He says, good, I've got a job for you. I said, really, Doc? This is April of 99. I've still got 2 months to serve. He says, I've got a job for you. He says, it's not yet public knowledge, but the ICC is going to award South Africa the 2003 Cricket World Cup, and I'd like you to head security for that. So before I even left the police, I had my first job. And when I did leave, I was appointed by Dr. Bacher as Cricket South Africa's first ever security consultant, that now has become a safety and security consultant. And my job was to go to the World Cup in England, which was happening that month, June of 99, June and July, I think it was. Go and see how they do things there, get some ideas, and come back and report back to me on what we need to do and how we can do it better.
Yeah. So
that's why, Adam, I can tell you the exact date that Lance Klusener and Alan Donald messed up that semi-final in, I think it was in Edgbaston, when we went out of the tournament in that tie to the Aussies, because it was the 17th of June. So the 16th of June, Madiba and I both worked our respective last days in our then jobs. And I got on a plane on the 17th and I went to England, and I went to do all of that. And I remember standing there in the airport. My wife was with me. We'd already checked in. So we on the other side of the security and passport. So we what's called airside, and I see this mess, and these Oaks, they somehow managed not to score 1 run or 4 balls. I said, babe, let's go. We're going home. We're not going there. It's going to be Australia versus Pakistan in the final. I'm not going for this. And she says, no, man, but you've got a job to do. So good sense prevails, and I did go. But anyway, that's another tangent. So the point I'm trying to make, Adam, is that having asked advice of, amongst others, Ali Bacher, my wish came true, and I ended up working in both security and in sport. So until today, Cricket South Africa is a client of ours. We've just hosted the Under-19 ICC Cricket World Cup. We hosted the full World Cup in 2003. I then went on to work on the 2007 World Cup in the West Indies. I've done a number of ICC events. They used to have an event called the Champions Trophy, which was like a shorter, quicker, faster mini World Cup. Only the top 8 cricketing nations on the ICC rankings played in it. We were then asked, when the IPL was formed in 1998, we were asked to do the team security. So for the first 8 editions of the IPL, we protected all of the teams. And I mean, that is an extraordinary event. You want to talk about an iconic event. It's right up there with the great events of the world. It's up there in a very different way. It's up there with the Wimbledons and the British Opens and the Masters and, the Grand Prix at Monaco. It's an extraordinary thing to go and witness a packed house at Wankhede Stadium in Bombay, with fireworks going off and dancing girls on the stages. And it's incredible to experience the passion, So yeah, that's part of our business now. We work in sport. We are probably, if not the best, we're one of the best agencies, that understands how to protect high-profile teams and athletes in whether it's a tournament, a tour, a games, whatever. We know how to do that, and we can do everything from writing the security plan from scratch, or just looking after one aspect of it. Probably mainly player and match officials protection. So we still work in that. And then, of course, I was there when the whole Hansie Cronje debacle happened, because I was protecting the Aussies who we were playing against in Durban when Hansie confessed that. And that was the start of what became the ICC Anti-Corruption Unit. And I was consulted on that. And a good friend of mine, Rory Steyn, who was a cop with me, he was my 2IC when I was the head of VIP protection in Joburg, which is how I got the Madiba job. Rory was my 2IC, and when the ICC needed to appoint a regional security manager for Southern Africa, I put Rory's name forward. He got the job. He's still in the job. And of the original 6 or 8 regional security managers that were appointed worldwide way back in 2000, Rory is the only one there. And in my view, he's the best of the lot. They should have made him commander of the unit long time ago, but that's not my call. And so we work within those kinds of things. So integrity in sport, Adam, has become a big thing, and not just in cricket, because there's been match fixing in soccer, there's been match fixing in tennis, there's been drugs in cycling and athletics, and the list goes on. So integrity in sport is a massive thing. So it's not just safety and security, it's also integrity around that kind of thing, cheating.
Yeah. And Rory, on a personal note, you obviously can't run anymore. The knees have given way.
No,
but you've taken up mountain. Your back's given way.
Back, yeah.
You've taken up mountain biking, and you've created a very special, unique mountain bike event, also with a very close connection to sport. Tell us a bit about that.
Sure. So it's only been a mountain bike event in the second iteration. So there's only been 2 events of what I called the African Icons Invitational. So just backing up to what I was saying a few minutes ago, Adam, about that series in Durban, when the whole Hansie Cronje thing came to light, Steve Waugh was the captain of the Australian team during that series. And we happened to beat them because it was a 6-match series, 3 games played in Australia and 3 games played in South Africa. And we won that series. We beat them in Australia 2-1, and we beat them in South Africa 2-1. And Steve Waugh and I became good mates when he came out as a young all-rounder on that first isolation breaking cricket tour in 1993. And if you go and read his, in fact, that's not true. We were in Australia in 93 and they came here at the beginning of 94. Now, bear in mind, the beginning of 94 was just before Madiba becomes president. And Steve Waugh is a slightly more cerebral cricketer than the average, international player. So he used to write these tour diaries. And he writes in the 94 tour diary that you could almost feel the political tensions in the country as we were building towards that first election that ultimately elected Nelson Mandela as our first president. And him and I became mates on that tour. Then he came back in 97 as the vice captain under Mark Taylor. And in 2000, as I've said, he came as the captain of Australia. And he then requested Cricket Australia to put a clause in the Memorandum of Understanding with Cricket South Africa that Rory Steyn would run their security. So I become their team security guy during that series. And that's when Hansi phones me at 2:30 in the morning saying that he needs to confess this and he wants to go to India and face the music, thinking that I was still a cop, not understanding that I was actually in that hotel where both teams were staying, looking after the Aussies. But, that's a story for another day. So when the 2015 Cricket World Cup happened, we'd had a pretty good year as a business. So our FD decides that the three shareholders, me and my two partners, are going to book ourselves tickets, buy some hospitality packages, and we're going to go and watch the Cricket World Cup in Australia. So we booked tickets for the semi-final in Melbourne, the semi-final in Auckland, and the semi-final at Sydney. The semi-final in Auckland, and then the final at the MCG. And of course, that semi-final in Auckland was the awful day that whole debacle happened around Vernon, and not fit Vernon Philander, and what's that fast bowler whose face I can see in front of me that should have played, that had been getting so many wickets, and he was booted out of the team on quota grounds, and we go and lose that semi-final. So we had dinner with Tugger, with Steve Waugh, the night before the final in Melbourne, my two partners and me and a few other guests. And he says to me, listen, mate, I'm putting together a cycling event in October or November of that year. This was in March when we were at the Rugby World Cup. Mm-hmm. So his charity is the Kids with Rare Diseases charity. He says, I'm going to get some, big names from Australian sport to come and ride this thing. But I'd really like you to come and ride, because I'd like you to come and tell a few Madiba stories. So his model is you get these oaks to pay, I think it was 10,000 Aussie dollars, which is more than 100,000 Rand now. So the entry was 10,000 Aussie dollars. You get to ride with all of these VIPs. And then it was, in that case, it was a 6-day event, 900 and something kilometers from Sydney to Byron Bay, which is a little beachside resort similar to Belito. And each little town that you stay over on the route, one of these big name sports celebrities will tell his life story. So you get like a whole leadership element to the event. It was brilliant. And I just happened to be one of the speakers that told a few Madiba stories like I've done today. And I then went back in 2016 and in 2017, and eventually he said to me, listen, why don't you do something like this in South Africa? And I said, you know what, Tugger, you're not the first one to suggest that to me, because one of my business partners had said, why don't we do a similar thing? So we did. And my desire had long been to give something back. Having been a cop for nearly 18 years, I wanted to give back to the cops. So I thought, well, let's do something for the widows and the orphans of police officers killed in the line of duty, which is what we did. So we established the African Icons Invitational. Steve Waugh came and rode in the first edition of the event. We had Joel Stransky there. We had Bruce Fordyce. We had Sanani Mangisa. We had Nick Bester. Sorry, my throat's getting dry. I'm doing so much yakking. And it was a great event. And that was a road bike event, Adam. We also did 6 days. We went from PE to Cape Town, all the way down the Garden Route without riding on the N2. And then the next year when you came on board, and you made such a massive difference, thank you for that. Last year it was, as you've said, a mountain biking event, and we actually became the first event given permission to ride mountain bikes in the Kruger Park. And we had a great time. And this year we would have gone to Mpumalanga to Dullstroom, but it looks like we're going to have to leave that for another year, given all of the COVID-19 issues. But it's something that I'd like to continue for as long as I can, raise money for the cops. You know, that thin blue line. It doesn't matter how much we criticize the police and how much we see them doing stupid things and even wrong things on our TV screens. Adam, at the end of the day, they stand in the gap for all of us. And, you know, the least we can do is look after the families of cops who lose their lives in the line of duty. So that's what the African Icons Invitational is. And we've got a great sponsor and partner in Tourvest, who came on board literally at the drop of a hat. They listened to me for 5 minutes and said, we're in. And they became the title sponsor. And of course, their entire industry is just... it's just been decimated by coronavirus. So our thoughts are also for them and for all the people in game lodges and hotels and the tourism industry, you know, the airlines. It's just something we're going to have to recover from. Yeah. So that's
and the sporting industry as well. I mean, there's so many guys that are out there struggling at the moment. Rory, just in closing, I mean, you've had an unbelievable career, a lot of it with a sport focus. Has there been a sporting moment, whether you've been in attendance or working or whatever it is, that has been the memory that you will hold on forever in terms of a sporting moment?
Yeah, I have to say there are three that come to mind, Adam. The first one was when Joburg Bobbies and I was asked to be the captain that year. We won the police championships in 1991, I think it was, and we beat Pretoria Police, and they had 3 Springboks in their team, and all of the rest of their players were Northern Transvaal, as it was, or Bulls. They were Bulls players or Northern Transvaal B, the whole lot of them. And we were behind 22-6 at halftime, and we came back and clapped them 33-28 in a final at a very wet Pinelands Police rugby field in Cape Town. And I will never forget that comeback, that second half comeback. You know, it's the kind of comeback that legends are made of. So that's one. The 95 Rugby World Cup is obviously another one, you know, having to endure those last few minutes, gritting my teeth, not being able to celebrate that incredible drop kick. I mean, you know, when I, in my mind's eye, see that ball going, I think it's still going up when it goes through the poles there, you know, after Joel hit it. And then, of course, the last one would be Kyle's international debut for Scotland, you know, at a packed Murrayfield, and hearing them sing Flower of Scotland, because, you know, they do it in a very special way there, Adam. They have the lone piper on the roof of the grandstand, and they have the entire massed pipe band on the field. And all of that plays the first verse of Flower of Scotland. And then as the second verse starts, all the music stops. And that entire crowd sing the second verse a cappella. And everyone knows the words. I was speaking to some French supporters, some Scottish family of mine who were amongst French supporters, and they were looking around like this when this happened. They said, does everybody know the words? And they can all sing it without accompaniment. It's something incredible to go and witness. If you ever get a chance to get to Murrayfield, you know, when Scotland play a home test match, please make sure you do that.
And lastly, Rory, the most impactful person you've met other than Madiba?
Oprah Winfrey. Okay. She's the only person other than Madiba. And, you know, I often say, Adam, that, and I hope this doesn't sound arrogant, but I say that people, you know, don't impress me. You know, big sports names or big movie stars or big celebrities, whatever. You know, I've been around long enough to know that you don't put people on pedestals. Everybody is fallible because we're all human. But other than Madiba, who is the benchmark, and that's why people don't impress me. If he's the yardstick, then please, you know. But the other person that has truly impressed me has been Oprah Winfrey. Just her sincerity and, you know, her motivation. The first time I heard her say this, she came to South Africa in 2002 with a desire, and it's a simple desire. She thought, why don't I go to South Africa and just bring a few gifts with me and give some Christmas presents away? So that became a project called Christmas Kindness that turned into a $3 million logistical exercise. And for 3 weeks, she did that. She went around, she did a week in Gauteng, she did a week in KZN, and she did a week down in the Eastern Cape. And during that week, and you'll hear her speak about this on a number of her shows, she stayed at Madiba's home in Kunu. And at the end of it, Madiba had arranged for her and her entourage to go to Velgevonden, where Steyn had built a house, because he owned that game lodge. So he built a special house there for Oprah to stay for a couple of nights. And it was right before Christmas, so she sent all of her staff that had come, because any of her staff from the Oprah Winfrey show that wanted to were allowed to come and work there, but they wouldn't be paid, but she would pay all of their expenses, and they would come and work as volunteers. So she sent them all home so that they could be with their families during Christmas, and that included her security detail. So she said, Rory, would you come with me then to Velgevonden? I'm sending Tom and Willie home. So I said, sure. And I did that. And when my wife came to fetch me, because we flew back by helicopter from there, and the helicopter landed next to her jet, ready to take her back to the United States. And my dad had, for whatever reason, come along with my wife and my boys to come and fetch me. And I didn't even know this, because I was off doing something. And my dad and Miss Winfrey ended up having a 2-minute conversation about dogs, because my dad is dead now, but he was one of South Africa's top Labrador breeders and judges. So they're chatting about dogs. So I don't know any of this. Anyway, I say goodbye. They get on the plane and they fly back to the US. We drive home. And everybody asks me, how was it? I said, it was the most incredible 3 weeks I've ever experienced. And she would stand up in these massive marquees while the children sat in rows from 6 years old to 18 years old, waiting to receive their gifts. And she would take the stuff out of each backpack, because they got them all in a backpack, pink for the girls, blue for the boys. And she took them out. And Adam, what I'll never forget, other than what she said, was that the loudest cheers from those kids and their parents who were in these massive marquees when the gifts came out were not the dolls or the soccer balls. It was for the school stuff. So when an exercise book and a box of crayons came out of the bag, that was when they cheered the loudest. Just, it's an eye-opener. Anyway, so she stood up there and she said that I have been blessed with much wealth. And I thought, it's quite a hectic thing to say when you're standing on a dusty soccer field with poverty all around you. But then she added that I have come to realize that with great wealth comes great responsibility. And that's why I'm here. I have made it my life's purpose to give back. And the point is that about 2 weeks later, so it was in the new year, I get a phone call from a lady in her office in Chicago who says, Rory, Miss Winfrey would like your father's address. She'd like to send him something. So I said, oh, that's very nice of her. So I give her the address, thinking, it's going to be one of those things like from the Oprah Winfrey show where everybody reach down under your seat and pull out, and there's a box of stuff there. And it was. There was some pots and pans and recipe book and whatever came across there. But then she said that Miss Winfrey wants to give your dad a gift because of the fact that you stood in for Tom and Willie when they were sent home, and you kind of also sacrificed your Christmas Eve, to be with us. So I said, well, that's my job. That's absolutely no problem. And in this box of stuff was an envelope with a first-class ticket. In those days, SAA still had a first-class cabin on the jumbo jet 747s. So she flew my dad first class to New York, put him up in the Four Seasons Hotel, had a limo pick him up at the airport, drive him to the hotel, pick him up at the hotel every day, and drive him to Madison Square Garden, where he attended the Westminster Dog Show, which is like the American version of Crufts in the US. Because in this 2-minute conversation on the tarmac when I was doing something, she had asked him, have you ever been to the Westminster Dog Show? And he said, no, it's not something I could afford. And that's what she did. Now, nobody knows about that, Adam. Well, now a few people know about it. But it wasn't ever publicized. She didn't make a big deal about it. She didn't even need to do it. She did it out of the goodness of her own heart. And, it's magnanimous acts of charity and kindness like that tell me about the kind of person you are. And another thing she said to me was, whenever she's in a restaurant, she watches how her staff treat the waiters, because that's how she measures the character of the people that she employs. So like with Madiba, and there are many life lessons that I learned from him. I learned that from her. I learned, and I've tried to teach my kids, that the way you treat a waiter who is working probably for pretty much nothing more than tips, says a lot about who you are. So don't ever, apart from the fact that they'll spit in your food, don't mistreat waiters. Treat them with dignity and respect because they're working hard for not much money. So yeah, she would be the one person other than Madiba.
Rory, I mean, it's been brilliant chatting to you today on Sport SA Daily Diary, but there's one thing we haven't quite focused on. Your personal achievements. We've spoken about team achievements and your kids' achievements and all that kind of thing. But from your personal achievements from a sporting perspective, is there a moment that stands out to you that's been that your moment, that real, I've achieved that unbelievable moment?
Yeah, a great question, actually, Adam, because you're right. Those others were about teams and Kyle. So, and that's an easy question to answer because unquestionably, there is no greater individual achievement that I can think of that I have been privileged to achieve other than a Comrades Green number. So, and even that was an opportunity to share it with my family because, you know, getting a Comrades Green number is I mean, it's an amazing achievement, but it's also a fantastic experience because the Comrades Marathon Association really do it right. So when you start your 10th run, you're running with a yellow number. And everybody that is getting close to their green will notice, they start to notice those yellow numbers. And throughout your whole day on your 10th run, you're getting people saying, hey, all the best or good luck for your 10th. Nobody says well done on your 10th because you haven't got it yet. But a lot of people will say, hey, man, nice going, you know, all the best, go and get it. And as you cross the finish line, there are a bunch of volunteers or marshals there that are looking out for those yellow numbers. And as you come across, they kind of shepherd you to one side. They shake you by the hand. They say, well done on getting your green. Please come with me. And this is after somebody has stuck a medal around your neck. And then they take you just next to the finish line. They've set up a little cubicle, like a little tented marquee cubicle that says the Green Number Club on there. And they'll have a legend of the race inside there and a photographer. And in my case, which was 2009, the legend who was in there was Jackie Meckler, you know, one of the big five. So you have two big fives in Comrades. You have the big five hills and you have the five that have won 5 or more Comrades. And 4 of them have won exactly 5, and of course Fordyce has won 9. And there's Jackie Meckler standing there in a Comrades Green Number blazer, and the CMA have got your permanent green number on a little embroidered felt cloth there, as well as a miniature one to put onto a tracksuit or whatever. And they formally hand it over, and the photographer takes pictures. And I don't actually know what inspired this, but I saw my family standing quite close to the green number tent on the finish line, and I ran out and I said to one of the CMA officials, I said, look, I'm going in there for photographs for my green number. Would you mind if I quickly bring my family in? And he said, no problem. So in came Jill and our 3 boys, and we took the photo. So, you know, to me, that's the greatest achievement because that is 10 years of hard work, a lot of K's in your legs, and they just make it so special. And you know, to me, I think there's no greater race on earth than Comrades. Well, there is actually. And then, you know, I also managed to run a marathon on all 7 continents, but that doesn't come close to winning a Comrades Green number. So I've got nothing more to prove with running. It's done, and I'm so proud to be a member of the Green Number Club at Comrades. Yeah, so thank you. I must
say, when I chatted to Bruce Fordyce a few weeks ago at the start of the lockdown, he said he'd be waiting on the finish line for me when I do my 10th. So that's incentive enough to get to my 10th.
100%.
Rory, it's been awesome chatting to you today on Sport SA Daily Diary. We could certainly chat all day, all afternoon, and all night. You have some amazing stories. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to hooking up again soon.
The privilege is mine, Adam. Thank you for inviting me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rory.
Don't miss tomorrow's episode of Sport SA Daily Diary, where we'll be chatting to Springbok women's captain, Babalawa Lacha.